warm welcome to the WION Education Summit. I'm Akanksha Swaroop. In August this year, the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres confirmed that the coronavirus has led to the largest disruption of education in history. With schools shut in over 160 countries, more than 1.5 billion students have been affected. The rushed closures and the instant switch to e-learning have allowed little time for planning or reflection on both the risks and opportunities, be it the availability of technology or the future of examination and evaluation online. In this session, we explore various aspects of online education and ask, is it here to stay? And to help me reflect on some of its challenges and opportunities, I'm joined by our esteemed guests, and let me introduce them to you. Dr. Amita Vatal, Principal of Springdale School in New Delhi. Michael Horn, co-founder of the Clayton Christensen Institute, a think tank with a focus on education, and Jiten Jain, a cybersecurity expert. A big thank you to all of you for joining our discussion today. Amita, if I may begin with you, how has the transition to digital been for the students? Also, how do you view digital learning compared to traditional schooling?
I think 20th of March sort of tore back the curtain completely on the way we look at education and on the way we look at learning. So there was a kind of a shockwave. And for the first 2 weeks, we were trying to get on with it by uploading videos and uploading material. But then we realized that this is not what learning is. And everybody was caught in surprise. And I think the entire world was caught in a sort of a surprise stranglehold. And so then we started sort of working towards how do we get on with the whole online process. And it's not about just replicating classrooms online. So in the first instance, perhaps for the first month, we wanted to help students because schools were opening in April. And we got into sort of replicating in certain ways how we engage with learning in classrooms. So teachers, put in their videos and their presentations and created modules. And for us, it was very, very challenging because you were not catering to a captive audience of 30 students who were looking up at you with awe, but you were catering to an entire world out there. There were grandmas and grandpas and all sorts of people who were viewing you, and they could have been very critical, and so you had to be very careful at the way you were transacting learning. Right. That itself was a sort of a goldfish model, and so but yet I think teachers were troopers, and they really took on that mantle, and they got out there and they started engaging themselves with children through this online process. That was in the first instance.
It has been a mammoth challenge indeed. Michael, if I may come to you, you've written a book called Blended. What do you mean by blended learning, and how can it benefit today's scenario of online learning?
Yeah, so when we talk about blended learning, what we've been talking about historically and pre-pandemic was the combination of online learning with brick and mortar schooling with teachers. So in essence, you could have the best of both worlds where online learning can deeply personalize for each individual's learning needs, acknowledging the fact that none of us learn the exact same way at the exact same time, and we have different learning needs at different times, and also acknowledging that most of us need a safe place to learn with our peers and teachers around to support us in that learning. And most families, frankly, count on schools to help with childcare and giving a safe place to learn. And so blended learning from our perspective is a huge opportunity, but only if you really do what it's so powerful about, which is reconceptualizing the classroom completely and figuring out how do we both personalize learning for each student, create active learning and very engaged learning environments where students are excited to be in school, and then finally create very social environments where they can actually have fun with their friends while learning, which is very different from how traditional classrooms have been set up.
Right. Perhaps now's the time to get our hands on that book, Blended. Now, Jiten, thank you, first of all, for patiently awaiting your turn. The internet penetration in India is not so high, and not everyone has access to high-speed internet for extensive video tutorials. How do you think we as a country can deal with this infrastructure challenge?
I think we are one of the largest, smartphone populations in the world. We have got highest number of smartphone internet users, but we do not have largest high-speed user base. So we do have optic fiber connectivity of National Knowledge Network across all villages and panchayats, but we do not have fiber to home. Every home, household does not have a high-speed connectivity. So while we have enough infrastructure to provide, online public services, certificates and government services, but if it comes to provide online education, which requires the high-speed network, I think we are lacking that. I mean, on the name of 4G, 5G, you could see many advertisements on TV, but the speed hardly works, especially in the rural areas. So that's challenge number one. Number two, even if you were to take care of that speed issue and provide connectivity somehow, you have to understand we are not West. In Western countries, this online education has been happening from last 4 or 5 years, especially in the top-ranking universities where online modules and courses have been available. But they have largely been available for the graduate and undergraduate students or postgraduate students, not for the schools. I mean, if you're talking about teenagers, online education has always been a big no-no. India has had a culture, South Asia has had a culture of taking additional classes like tuitions in the evenings, and that culture was monetized by, companies like Byju, which offered tutorials online. But, this online tutorials for teenagers can be an additional helping hand. They cannot replace traditional education. Right. And I'm very glad to see Amita pointing out challenges she faced, because we've seen campaigns running on social media that how, online education is no different than traditional education, how this is much better and cost effective and, saves money and all those things. But you must understand that, in your formative years, it is not the education you receive from the textbooks. There is a 360-degree development which happens of a child. Right. You don't go to a foreign university to get a fancy degree. You go there to get cultural experience.
Absolutely.
To have a wide perspective, which can never be replaced by online education.
So that
my final point is that in a country like India, where we have a digital divide, where rural India does not have computers, high-speed internet, it will be a huge challenge to meet those expectations.
Those are some very valid points made by you, Jiten. And since you mentioned Amita, let me bring in Amita. Amita, will the role of educators now be redefined since conventional classroom approach is not practical anymore?
Yes, it continues to be redefined for the simple reason that whenever there has been a race between education and technology, education has had a setback. Because, technology is so fast evolving and it takes a little time for education to catch up, because people who design it are few and people who don't know about it are many. So definitely the role is going to change. But I would say that in many ways, we have to accept that it cannot be a complete online kind of transition. It has to be blended. And I know that once the pandemic is over, which it will be because everything passes, we will have to have this hybrid learning, a sort of blend, because we can't say that it will not happen again. But educators now have to realize that if technology is not going to be an integral part of their lives and upgrading themselves is not going to be there, they're going to be left behind. They're going to be dinosaurs. So it's very, very essential for educators to continuously upgrade themselves and be on sync, because the children who they are teaching are children now who have a very different world that they're going to inherit, and they've already inherited, because this pandemic has created a very strange kind of a sort of a playing field for children and for educators. And so I think both of them have to find different biomedias of engagement, of humanizing learning. And the teachers will have to sort of understand you cannot make it a complete machine-ridden learning system, right. And that is not the way you talk to young people. There has to be a humanizing element in online learning, along with a mix of
element in online learning. Fair enough, Amita. Michael, let me come to you. Your think tank focuses on disruptive innovations. With the advancement in technology, how do you think the new age digital learning can be improved and made more effective?
Yeah, well, I think you already started to hear glimmers of it, which is that this notion that online learning has to be video and with a very high-speed internet connection and internet on the laptop and so forth, that's going to be increasingly an antiquated notion. I think what we're seeing is that smartphone applications for learning have gotten immeasurably better over the last couple years that operate at much lower bandwidths. They create very active learning experiences, which research shows is critical for good learning, where the student is actively participating, answering questions constantly, not passively sitting back. And so we've seen some dramatic advancements in the state of the art just from very simple mobile applications that are demonstrably better at teaching everything from business education to language learning to the fundamentals of math and reading and science. And so that's really, I think, where the trajectory is going, to much better designed experiences on the mobile phone right now.
Right. Jiten, let me also come to you. At the same time, in countries like India, access to remote learning is becoming a huge roadblock, something you just mentioned in the beginning as well. Do share the challenges of digital learning.
I think, look, it is like this. The first challenge is that what about half of India's society in rural areas which do not even have a computer or a smartphone? Are you going to deny them, those children, a right to education? And it's very fancy to talk about in urban cities about online education, digital schooling and stuff, and Zoom calls, Zoom classes. What about villages? Are we going to turn a blind eye? They are still dependent on those, educational channels of All India Radio and Doordarshan. Probably there lies a way for the mass education in the villages. But then, there are other challenges. You see, I am a technologist. I am all for technology. But, in last 6 months, my heart as a businessman is at complete contradiction with my thinking, what I perceive and what I'm seeing. I'll tell you what. When you bring a child on a Zoom school, there are people who said that companies like Sony, which ran massive campaigns that how PlayStation will replace playgrounds. It did. But then what is the effect on children? Today, children are not going for physical activities. Everybody wants video games and YouTube videos. And then you have to have these de-addiction classes of, then have some sort of special courses to send children for physical activity. Now, you are telling it's good to have digital blackboards in schools. But if you tell children that you have to buy iPads and laptops for homework and classes, it is not the divide you're creating, but you are ensuring that they forget how to write. I am seeing a generation of children today who do not have a good handwriting. They know how to type, but they don't know how to write. And very soon then now Google is introducing autocorrect and all those things. People are learning to write correct spellings. So remember, we are not training machines. We are not creating robots. You are here to educate children and create good human beings for tomorrow, and that can never happen online. And last point I want to make, you see, it's not about children. Today every small child has to be accompanied by a grandmother or a mom when she is attending online class. There are risks of accidental exposures. Our society do not have great digital hygiene or cyber education. They are falling prey to online bullying. They are falling prey to online frauds. They are there are teachers who are complaining that I have been bullied in my class by unknown students. So there are all sort of problems we are facing. So I think because of pandemic, we must do our best to provide whatever support to the students in the online mode. But it can never be a reason for online education to stay forever in a permanent mode.
Right, Jiten, those are some very, very concrete challenges that you have actually just mentioned. Let me also bring in Michael. Michael, do you think that there are certain solutions that could be perhaps worked upon?
I do think that there are. We've seen that actually online education for some students in the United States has been a very suitable and in fact better alternative in certain circumstances. I think that there have to be a certain set of things, though, that are in place. The first one is for those that do not have access to the digital tools that were just mentioned, the governments or schools must provide what is the adequate necessary set of resources. And that might be internet connectivity, that might be devices, that might be clever solutions that power on solar and the like, but you need to be able to provide that baseline. The second is that you need to have a clear culture around digital citizenship and digital literacy. And you need to be able to say, these are the norms of what it means to be in online learning. It cannot be your entire schooling experience. You need to get physical activity. You need to get offline. You need moderation. And then the third thing is you need your family, if you're going to be doing this fully remote, which is, again, not what I typically recommend. But if you're going to go that route, your family is all of a sudden a co-educator in this process. And you need to make sure that it's very clear what their level of involvement and the expectations are and clarify that up front, because otherwise it's very, very challenging to do this well.
That's a very relevant point, Michael. On that note, let me bring in Amita. Amita, you just heard what Michael had to say. He's saying that the family has to play the role of co-educators. On that note, the hours-long digital classes are also posing some serious challenges for working parents, you see, especially for the ones with primary school kids. Especially now with offices reopening, it may not be possible for parents to juggle between work and children's classes. How are schools planning to address this problem?
before I talk about that, I think the most important thing we should talk about is that there are so many issues that are coming up with health, with the online issue. Because all the time, the emotional, the physical and the mental areas are being affected in very big ways. Because the emotional compass, especially of young children and adolescents, have not been created yet. And as a result of which, there's a lot of angst, there's a lot of irritability, mood swings, self-harm, abuse that is going on. And parents have become at the center of this. Because there are also abuse going on with children. Because parents have not been used to having children living with them on a 24/7 basis. And it's been a very different society.
Right.
And again, when I just want to make a couple of more points. And what I would like to say here is that women, per se, are facing a lot of hardships because it is them who have to then stay back. It is they who have to then lose out on, say, a particular job or take a sabbatical, because somebody or the other has to be there to ensure if younger children are going online. And in poorer areas, the parents can't cope in any case. They can't even, they take away the smartphone and go off, and the child is left unless there is some helpline that works with the child later in the evening through the school. So there are compounded problems of how parents are going to come into this whole space. So we have to look at that very carefully, because parents also need help. And they cannot, because they also have a living to do. People have lost their jobs. They suddenly can't sit at home and start looking at online learning for their children. So in this context, schools really have to work around these challenges. And as of now, these are really big challenges. And women are the ones who are going to really take that hit, mothers of the family and so on. Yeah.
I'm a mother, Amita, and I know exactly what you're just talking about. Michael, let me come to you. Can online learning platforms encompass free-flowing conversations, debates, and practical applications like lab experiments? Don't they lose flavor when done online?
Look, there are differences and there are trade-offs and everything, but what I will tell you is that there's some amazing platforms out there. Minerva Project, for example, offers one in concert actually with a rural university in India right now, where it literally facilitates the most robust conversations you've ever seen. They are far better than any college seminar any of us sat through, with incredible active learning and everyone participating. And so we've seen that free-flowing conversation be replicated, but actually I would say improved in the online environment. The second example to answer around science is that there are some very interesting companies like Labster and other environments that allow you to have virtual lab experiments, and no, it doesn't allow you to actually smell the gas from the experiment you're doing or something like that, but you're also able to do a bunch of experiments you would never otherwise be able to do, and it's better than the alternative, nothing at all. You know, you can do an experiment now I would recommend doing in person or in reality, but it's incredible actually the virtual labs that are popping up online that allow you to do real inquiry and scientific thought.
What will be the new criteria for a child's examination, and how challenging will it be in terms of value assessment? Do we now need new policies for a new education model?
Yeah, I think absolutely. I mean, look, what we just heard there, personalized and competency-based, I think are exactly the way we need to move as we start to capture students' learning. And what we ought to be looking at as for each individual student, rather than having one exam that they sit for at the end of the year or at the end of a certain number of years, to see do they make the cut or don't they make the cut, or how much did they get wrong and so forth. How do we move assessment to be a much more continuous? Yeah, I think absolutely. I mean, look, what we just heard there, personalized and competency-based, I think are exactly the way we need to move as we start to capture students' learning. And what we ought to be looking at as for each individual student, rather than having one exam that they sit for at the end of the year or at the end of a certain number of years, to see do they make the cut or don't they make the cut, or how much did they get wrong and so forth. How do we move assessment to be a much more continuous operation that is combined with the learning to give teachers and parents and the students themselves the insights on how that they're doing, and that allows them to constantly be mastering and focusing on what they need to do next for their learning, and thereby creating a transparent record of this is what I've mastered, this is what I've really been good at, this is what I've dove deeper in, this is where I've accelerated and done more. That's almost real time, if you will, that gives a much, that takes away the high stakes nature and instead encourages a development of every single child into who they're meant to be.
Right. Amita, would you like to add anything to what just Michael said? And should e-learning be treated as a temporary measure, or should it become part of the education policy?
No, it should become. In fact, the National Education Policy has made it very clear that the digitalization of our country and the digitalization of learning is very essential, because it's very good for tracking students' records. It's very good for having learning anytime, anywhere. It's very good for children doing personalized learning, and for them not having an information overload, but being able to sift what they would like to learn and have innumerable courses they can do. So I think e-learning has to be blended, but there is absolutely no compensation for a school of brick and mortar. So there has to be an interesting mix between the two, as I always said that, because ultimately schools are about what? They're far beyond learning. They're about companionship. They're about freedom. They're about peer relationships. They're about character building. They're about self-esteem. But even these aspects you can bring into e-learning through bringing in values, through the skills that you teach. So I think it's very essential that we are able to blend the two aspects of learning, a hybrid, and make it a sort of a holistic 360-degree kind of learning system. And that's what the future is. And it should be. Right?
Fair enough, fair enough. And striking that perfect balance is going to be of utmost importance. Jiten, would you like to suggest any possible solutions for difficulties related to virtual learning?
Akanksha, when I was a child, I studied in a government school where my fees was 3 rupees a month. So I've seen those days. I've seen that infrastructure of education, what it offers in a government school, Sarvodaya Vidyalaya in New Delhi. I went on to study in one of the best, topmost private schools and colleges, and then to London also. So I've seen all sides of the world, and I can confidently say that national education policy also understand that online education will be there for personalization as a supportive hand. So first we must learn to differentiate between the online education for adults, which is like above 18 graduate and postgraduate students, and then for teenagers, and then for small children. Now for teenagers and small children, we have to be very careful that around 60 million children in India who are dependent on government for midday meals and uniforms and textbooks, they have absolutely no resources to meet their ends. There is no way they would be able to afford a smartphone or a laptop or a high-speed internet. So I think a huge chunk of government's money, you see in urban cities and colleges, schools like Spindle schools, I'm sure they would be able to ensure that there are students are able to afford those gadgets which are required for online education. But those 60 million children, I think the large chunk of government's education and pool has to go for All India Radio's Gyanvani channels and Doordarshan, which can have a multicast mechanism which can educate masses. I think we must keep in our hearts and minds the children who are standing at the last leg of our society. The urban cities will take care of their own, and I'm sure there are many mechanisms to deal with those challenges. But in our priority list, we have to have those 60 million children.
Absolutely. So we've discussed the challenges, we've discussed the opportunities and also the solutions. Going forward, what does online education mean for the future? Let me have your closing thoughts on that. Let's begin with Amita. Amita, your thoughts, please.
No, I'd just like to quickly make a point here that I have 800 children from the poorest of the poor slums in my school. I'm not an elite school. And I have 400 children who are suffering from a variety of special needs. So I have autistics, and I have children with cerebral palsy and Down syndrome. And they're all that we have been connecting with. And so there are many ways and means of connecting with children like this. They may not have mobiles, but we are ensuring that the communities give them out gadgets and devices. And so what I do believe is that it's very important that we bring in sort of technologies of 2.0 and bring in these optical fibers. And they are not optical fibers across the states, because I've been doing a lot of work with the state governments. And I've seen that if we bring it in, there is a great need for that. And what Michael was saying is that across India, if we do something like this, the last child will be met. Every child should be given a device. There are not enough phones. The phones are taken away by their parents. They don't have it. When they go to the fields, they take away the phones. So every child should be given a tablet or a device. Every child should be given some gadget through which learning can take place. And the most important thing which the Prime Minister has been saying across the ramparts of Red Fort is that they are going to create these lines. They're going to create these optical fibers. Well, then they should, because without that, learning is going to take a big hit in our country, and I'm sure they will, because they've said they would do it. And I'm looking forward to the fact that the last child in our country will get learning in the way he should have it. I mean, it's his right to get it.
Amen to that. Jitin, what would you like to say? What is the importance of digital learning for the future?
No, I agree with Amitaji and Michael. There has to be, solutions around it. And then, I agree with Michael that, online education does solve the problem of affordability, infrastructure, and distance. And especially, in the lower strata of schools where they never had labs, forget about, cybersecurity labs or, chemistry labs. The virtual labs do solve that problem of infrastructure. So this is a new beginning which is going to revolutionize education. And there is another thing which I'm seeing that, the quality education which was not available and the quality health infrastructure which was not available in rural areas, I'm sure that, online schooling and online telemedicine would solve that problem of distance and affordability. Right. And it is going to have a revolutionary effect on Indian society. But my only concern is at the scale and the digital divide. So there are whatever best we can do to fill that gap. Right. We must all make our contribution.
Scale and digital divide, two very valid points. Michael, your closing thoughts.
Yeah, two thoughts. One is that there's never been a one-size-fits-all schooling system that can serve everyone. And so that as we walk into this future, I think we should be very clear-eyed that one system that we create will not serve all students well. And that instead we need to use the technology to blend it with these schools to create a system that's flexible, that can meet each child where he or she is and serve them in the best possible way. Second thing I'd say is moderation in everything. We don't want all online. I think that would be dangerous. And we want to make sure we create a balanced and whole children, that we serve all parts of them. And then the third thing I would say is that, look, as we walk into this with clear-eyed expectations and don't totally believe the hype, but also see the enormous opportunities, conversations like the one we've had today, where we talk about the challenges, opportunities, and benefits, is just a huge step forward for everyone right now. So thank you.
Absolutely. And one thing I can certainly say with confidence is that our discussion has been certainly very holistic. Thank you, guests, for sharing your precious inputs. It's been a pleasure to have you on board. Quoting Albert Einstein, we cannot solve problems by using the same kind of thinking we used when we created them. And so in terms of digital learning, here's hoping we build back better through this crisis. And with that, I come to the end of this session. Thank you so much for watching.